Let's bring in Peter Baker, chief White House correspondent for the New York Times, and Chuck Rosenberg, former U.S. attorney and senior FBI official. Both are MSNBC contributors. And Mr. Baker, let's start with you. I want to build off my colleague Monica Alba's reporting there about the Trump team's strategy. What are your sources in the White House telling you, Peter, about how the president, how he plans to spend these days ahead?
Yeah, no, it's a great question because, in fact, he's got 70 days to go, and there doesn't seem to be any genuine path toward, winning this thing. And so it's really a matter of how you get from this point of defiance to a point of acceptance. You saw Mick Mulvaney, his former acting chief of staff, wrote in the Wall Street Journal this morning that once the outcome is clear, he thinks that President Trump will actually concede the election gracefully. We haven't seen any evidence of that so far, and I think that that there's a desire on the part of the president to play out the string a little bit more with these challenges. But there's nothing in the courts right now that would overturn this election, it looks like. I mean, there's nothing that seems to be on a path toward making any meaningful difference in the outcome. So I think that what it really is trying to get a president who hates the idea of being seen as a loser to come around to accept the idea that, in fact, that this contest is really over.
Chuck, to Peter's point there, I mean, when it comes to these legal challenges by the Trump campaign, what's the bottom line on these legal plays?
Right. Peter's exactly right, Craig. I mean, there's a huge difference between filing a lawsuit and filing a meritorious lawsuit. I mean, anyone is capable of filing a lawsuit, but to file a meritorious lawsuit, one in which you could actually succeed, you need this thing that we call evidence. And so far, there doesn't seem to be very much of that. So I agree with Peter. I think this is a political strategy, not a legal strategy. If it's a legal strategy, it's doomed to failure.
Chuck, I want to play an interesting point that former Republican Homeland Security Secretary Michael Chertoff made about the election results and get your take on the other side.
If you look at the fact that there was apparently a fair amount of ticket splitting where people voted for Joe Biden for president, but then may have voted for a Republican for the House or for the Senate, that reinforces the idea that there was no fraud.
Chuck, your thoughts on that argument. Is it a political point that could be considered in court?
Well, first of all, Mike's a very smart guy, and I had the privilege of working with him in the Justice Department. However, what he is saying is that if they needed to, the Biden folks could adduce evidence that there's no fraud. They could adduce it statistically in the way he's describing. They don't have to, Craig, and here's why. The burden of proof is always on the person bringing the lawsuit, the plaintiff, the complainant. In this case, it would be the RNC on behalf of the Trump campaign or something like that. And so the Biden folks don't have to prove anything in court. Right now, the burden of proof is wholly on the Trump campaign to prove that there was some fraud or some procedures that weren't followed or some regulation that wasn't abided. And if they can't do that, and I don't think they can from what I've seen so far, you don't have to worry about the second half of the equation. Again, the Biden folks don't have to prove anything. Burden is on the plaintiff, and the plaintiff doesn't have evidence.
Peter Baker, President Trump gliding down that golden escalator in 2015, it really, sort of set the tone for his first campaign, his administration as well. A moment from Saturday stands out for his reelection campaign. Here's the headline from the Philadelphia Inquirer, quote, "No, not that Four Seasons. How Trump team's news conference ended up at a Northeast Philly landscaping firm." How does that news conference with the president's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, standing in front of Four Seasons Total Landscaping near a sex shop and a crematorium, how does that encapsulate this campaign, perhaps even this era of our politics, Peter?
Well, it's certainly a bad metaphor politically. It's hard to imagine a political staff on its game not seeing that would be a bad idea to have it at a place like that, especially, given that the president himself seemed to be confused about where it would be. He initially tweeted out that it would be at the Four Seasons in Philadelphia, and then suddenly somebody obviously told him or got hold of his Twitter account and said, no, it's actually the Four Seasons Total Landscaping firm, something of a different image. And I think that, any advanced staff worth its weight would have recognized that having this event at that place with that name next to as you put out, a sex shop, adult bookstore was just, setting the metaphor of a campaign that was over, that was sort of ending in a parking lot rather than in the grandeur of the Trump Tower, as you put it, when they announced 5 years ago. You'll see that, I think, written up in history books someday as kind of like here's how it all came to an end.
An apt metaphor, perhaps indeed. Peter Baker, thank you. Chuck Rosenberg, always good to have both of you gentlemen. Thank you.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.